I don't know how many of you have heard of the Myers-Briggs personality test, but for those who don't know, it's this personality test you can take on the internet that claims to divide the entirety of humanity into 16 distinct different personality types. And they all have these lovely fancy names, the architect, the virtuoso, etc. And when I was about 12 or 13, I used to be obsessed with this test. I found it on the internet, took it, and was amazed by all of the incredibly complimentary statements that it gave about my personality. I forced all of my friends to take it, and became completely insufferable. And I looked up other people that had the same personality type as me. So apparently 12-year-old me had a very similar personality to Margaret Thatcher, so you can make that what you will. And I became more and more invested in this personality test that I had found. But the thing is, the Myers-Briggs personality test isn't based on any actual scientific evidence. It wasn't created by a psychologist, and most psychologists reject it as a legitimate way to understand human psychology. And it's actually been found that if you take the test and then take it again 2 weeks later, you're likely to get a different personality type. And when I was becoming more and more obsessed with this test all those years ago, it didn't take me very long to find articles and YouTube videos and things debunking it, but it still took me an incredibly long time to admit that the test wasn't scientifically based. Because by that point, I had become personally invested in the idea that the test was scientific. My personality type, I felt, was part of me. And so I didn't want to admit that this thing that I had invested so much effort in and so much time into wasn't actually real. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Why it took me such an incredibly long time to admit that the Myers-Briggs personality test isn't based on science. And how we can all try to avoid doing what I did. So this idea of people investing beliefs into their identity can be backed up by psychology. There's a generally well-established theory in psychology called social identity theory, which states that the groups and communities that a person is part of form part of their identity and their self-esteem. And so we derive a lot of our identity and our self-worth from the groups that we make up. And this is in no way a bad thing. It can form strong communities and cultures and drive progress. But an issue does arise if we become too willing to create groups that incorporate certain beliefs into their founding, so that those beliefs can't be questioned within the group, because that can foster closed-mindedness in those groups incredibly easily. And to show you what I mean, we can take a fun made-up example. So welcome to the Atlantean Society. Let's say that you join a society that's devoted to discovering Atlantis. And you join all of the Atlantean weekly meetings, and you go on their hunts, and you make friends with all of the other Atlantis hunters. And you become more and more invested in the Atlantean community. If you were to find out the truth about Atlantis, which is that it was made up by Plato to make a political point, are you likely to accept that when it would go against everything that you've just been investing yourself in, and it would contradict the entire community that you will just become a part of, that you've made part of your identity? Or are you more likely to just reject it? That's what I did when I found out evidence that went against something that I invested myself into. And of course, this isn't just relegated to made-up examples about Atlantis. Our national identity is one of the strongest and earliest groups that we learn to identify with. And patriotism is based around the idea that your country is great. In a surprisingly large proportion of the population, that your country is better than most other countries. And I say a surprisingly large proportion of the population because in 2016, a YouGov survey was conducted that found that out of 12 out of the 19 countries that they surveyed, a majority of the population felt that their country was better than most other countries. And however you define what makes a country better than another country, it's impossible for the majority of countries to be better than most countries. And I think that this is a worry if this is how most people think, because if we associate our own national identity with the idea that we are better than most other countries, then we're more likely to be unwilling to accept other ideas from different nations that could allow us to improve. But I think probably one of the most worrying places in which this effect can manifest is in politics. Because in so many political communities, the community itself is based around believing certain sets of factual beliefs. A communist community has to believe that private ownership of business should be abolished. An anarchist community, to join it, you have to believe that the government should be abolished. And so this can foster a closed-mindedness in these political groups that is probably a force for the worst. And you can see this by looking at some of the cult and conspiracy theory behavior that has developed in some of the most extreme political groups. So on the political left, the Democratic Workers' Party of California was a party that existed until 1986. It was Marxist-Leninist, and it was described as a cult by former member Janja Lalich. And Lalich felt, while she was part of the party, that there were certain beliefs that were regarded by the party as unquestionable. She would have doubts, often, about aspects of the founding beliefs of the party, but feel that she was unable to express them, that she wouldn't be allowed to. And she was actually only able to leave the party in 1986 when it dissolved. And on the political right, we also have QAnon, which is based around the beliefs espoused by the founder named Q. And of course, to be part of QAnon, you have to believe those particular facts and beliefs that are given by Q. And so, of course, this has led to it becoming more and more closed-minded, classified more and more as a cult and a conspiracy theory. And so I think the impact of all of this is that people are influenced to act irrationally. If we invest our beliefs into our identity, we're less likely to be open to changing those beliefs. And so how do we solve this problem? It's impossible to stop people from associating their beliefs, to associating the groups that they're part of with their identity. I don't think we should try to stop that anyway, but we should try to form groups that are open to criticizing themselves. And in fact, if self-criticism and self-doubt and changing beliefs according to the evidence is incorporated into the group itself, then that can form a kind of virtuous cycle where self-doubt and self-criticism is more and more built into the culture of our communities. But I think the thing that I'd like to leave you most with is the fact that our beliefs are not part of us. You can change your beliefs without changing yourself. And so you should be able to change them based on the evidence. And also, never take personality tests. Thank you.